A very warm welcome to the American guests in the audience, to all other Dutch people here. And I can't tell you what an honor it is for me and a privilege to be giving this L'Enfant lecture here in the Netherlands, the first one that you do abroad. And I feel humbled that you have asked me. Thank you very much. Well, as you already said, Paul, our embassy in Washington has cultivated an intense relationship with the American Planning Association. Symposiums, study tours, workshops, and now this lecture, I think, demonstrates it. And I would really like to add my words of appreciation to Dale Morris of the embassy. Dale, you have been so instrumental, worked so hard to get this relationship going. And I think it has led to a lot of beautiful things. So thank you very much for that. Let me explain maybe to our Dutch friends why I think Paul and Chase asked me to give this L'Enfant lecture. Water management, spatial planning and urban design are, as you can imagine, not the Ministry of Foreign Affairs' core business. Our business is diplomacy, promoting growth in the Netherlands and elsewhere. We represent Dutch citizens and policies abroad and promote international collaborations on issues of development, food security, human rights, the rule of law, national security. We are not architects, planners, engineers, biologists or water managers, even though some colleagues might think differently. They are not. That expertise lies primarily with the Netherlands Ministry of Infrastructure and the Environment. That ministry, plus our provincial and municipal governments, water boards, academics and the private sector have the real expertise. Our feet are dry, our citizens safe, our cities resilient, our landscape sustainable, our water is fresh because of their hard work. They ensure that Dutch infrastructure, roads, bridges, rail, airport and flood protection is robust, that foreign investment is secure and that our economy can function. So what I say today is also on their behalf. The Netherlands is not the only country that must manage flood risk or deal with sea level rise and more extreme weather, or occupy a landscape that will become more vulnerable. That is where my ministry comes in. Our diplomats, in partnership with other Dutch agencies, take homegrown Dutch water expertise and apply it abroad. We do this bilaterally in Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, China, the Caribbean, South America, the Middle East, and in Africa. We do this multilaterally via the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the United Nations. And we export that expertise to enhance our own domestic economy. Over the next 40 minutes or so, I will take you into the heart of our delta, through our cities' canals and research labs and across the globe. Our past, present and future will guide us, and our lens will be water management, landscape design, planning and collaboration. You'll learn what makes us arguably the world's best water managers and what gives us the world's best protected delta. The Dutch in the audience will hear a familiar, yet perhaps surprising water story of an active government and embassies partnering with the international community in planning, engineering, science and design. Partnering to also enhance our own practices, policies and domestic and economic goals. Let's start with Rotterdam. In the 13th century, fishermen placed a dam on the river de Rotte to stop saltwater from contaminating freshwater marshes and farmland. When cargo from seagoing vessels was lifted over the dam onto smaller vessels, Rotterdam's role as a trading location was firmly established. Rotterdam's strategic location between the fertile delta and river regions and the sophisticated consumers in The Hague, Amsterdam and Delft translated immediately into wealth. Shipbuilding took root nearby, and a few centuries later so did steelmaking, chemicals, logistics and manufacturing. All of this because of a dam on a river to keep saltwater at bay. 400 years ago, Rotterdam's forefathers made water environmental planning and economic development the heart of the city's future. Their vision made Rotterdam the beating heart of the Dutch economy. Rotterdam is a microcosm of the Netherlands. Its climate and water challenges are found in all corners of my country. It is fitting, I think, that we find ourselves here today. While all people have water in their blood, we Dutch have water in our DNA. This is not by accident. If anything defines us, it is water. It was said by earlier speakers as well, and you said it too, Martin. Fresh water, salt water, polluted water, stormwater, groundwater, too much water, too little water. Water that brought trade and commerce. Water that gives form to our iconic cities, defines our landscape, and infuses our culture. And water that has brought many floods. These floods claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. They changed the land, its form, and its uses. And for centuries, they left a potent legacy in Dutch minds. Strengthen the dikes, fight the water, tame the landscape. And we created, after hundreds of years, a safe and attractive landscape. Our flood protection standards, in which some areas are protected against a 1 in 10,000 year storm, are the marvel of the world. And our flood protection barriers are iconic statements of how we deal with water. Abreast the old Amsterdam Stock Exchange is the statement, "De kost gaat voor de baat uit." Cost comes before benefits. And that is absolutely true of our investment in flood infrastructure. Untold billions of euros and who knows how many lives have been saved because of our flood defenses. We build this infrastructure out of physical and economic necessity. If the ports of Rotterdam or Amsterdam or Schiphol Airport would flood, our economy would be crippled. If multinational corporations and budding entrepreneurs don't feel safe investing in our economy, they won't. The 21st century, however, has intensified our challenges. Sea level is rising. Coastal storms may become more extreme. Erosion, increased river discharge, more rain, periodic droughts, salt intrusion, subsidence, all these in the world's third most densely populated country. Our old higher the dikes approach is no longer sustainable or affordable. We understand better today than yesterday that the physical landscape and environment dominate us as much as we try to dominate it. So a new path, a new paradigm is before us, where we live with water and not always fight it. Our collective DNA is thus mutating away from flood resistance at any cost to flood accommodation whenever possible. Einstein once said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that caused them." Climate change, better environmental knowledge, and socio-demographic trends, as well as Einstein, inspire us to new policies and practices. After Hurricane Katrina, the Dutch government empaneled the Second Delta Commission to study how the Netherlands might adapt to climate change, as well as to the uncertainty of climate change. I want to quote from the Commission's report, and I quote, "The threat is not acute, but our mandate is urgent. There is absolutely no reason for panic, but we must be concerned for the future. We have been asked to come up with recommendations not because a disaster has occurred, but rather to avoid it. The challenge to the Netherlands is not primarily a threat, it also offers new prospects. How can we ensure that future generations will continue to find our country an attractive place in which to live and work, to invest and take their leisure?" Unquote. The Commission set forth broad ideas and a number of what we Dutch call N, or what you Americans would call and this and that recommendations. The integration of water management and spatial planning. the creation of a long-term vision, and short-term actions. Multiple levels of defense approach in which prevention, planning and resiliency lower the risk of a flood event and the impacts of a flood should it happen. A series of governance actions, a delta and a delta fund, and a delta decisions and a delta commission, and even a delta commissioner, Wim Kuiken, who we all know. I want to explore two proposed changes through the lens of better science, analysis and policy making used in the Netherlands. We Dutch, as I'm sure you know, can pinch a penny with the best of them. We want to sit in the first row, but only pay a dime for the seat. Oftewel, voor een dubbeltje op de eerste rang zitten, for the Dutch amongst us. Our individual thriftiness is collective. Our approach to public and private expenditure is sober. A number of flood protection improvements were underway when the Second Delta Commission recommended a 10-fold increase in flood protection levels. Currently, there are 53 dike rings in the Netherlands, each with one of four protection levels that vary from 1 to 1250 to 1 to 10,000 years. The current levels, developed in the 1960s for coastal areas and in the 1990s for river areas, were not uniformly based upon cost-benefit analysis. A decade ago, an independent review concluded that the existing protection standards for the dike rings did not properly reflect their economic value. This is not surprising, given economic and socio-demographic development over the years. But should we, as the Delta Commission recommended, increase all levels by a factor of 10? Is that the most efficient thing to do from an investment or cost perspective? Our new National Water Plan requires us to develop optimal flood protection standards for all dike rings. So within the confines of our Delta program and alongside the Central Bureau for Economic Policy Analysis, Deltares, Tilburg University, HKV Consultants and TU Delft, we did just that. The new cost-benefit analysis counts construction and maintenance cost of infrastructure, financial and economic losses, intangible losses, environmental, landscape, cultural heritage, and the loss of human life. It counts numerous tangible and less tangible benefits. It is complex and mind-numbing, so I'll skip the details, but share with you some of its findings. First, as areas get denser and gain higher economic values, economically efficient protection levels should increase over time. This means our work is never done. Second, the incidence of piping, in which water seeps under a dike and destabilizes it, under Dutch river levees, was substantially underestimated. In other words, flood probabilities in river areas may be higher than estimated, and thus additional protective measures are needed. Third, inundation scenarios show worse impact in riverine areas than in coastal areas. This was a surprise. We always believed the water wolf that comes from the sea was more dangerous. Fourth, a higher level of public risk aversion for small probability, high impact events meant that a risk premium can be priced in the cost-benefit analysis. Fifth, that the geographical pattern of optimal protection differs from the current legal standards. And finally, that raising all dike ring protection levels by a factor of 10 was unnecessary, and that raising dike levels in a few areas would be sufficient for the time being. Our new cost-benefit analysis shows us how to be safer and smarter and save ourselves billions of euros in the interim. Not a bad outcome from economics, or what we all know to be the dismal science. This cost-benefit tool was awarded the prestigious 2013 Frans Edelman Award, given to the premier examples of advancements in management science. I applaud the team members, and some of them are in the audience here this afternoon. We are proud and our wallets are lucky to have these economists working for us, and will be happy to lend them for a minimal fee to other countries that have flood risk and limited public funds, as I'm afraid most countries have at the moment. So our new paradigm and tools help us quantify the benefits of ecosystem services. These are the things from nature we need and use: clean air, water, food. They are produced by natural capital: trees, mountains, oceans, rivers. They yield beneficial processes like flowing water, nutrient cycling, passive flood protection. They provide habitat, food, water storage, recreation, and aesthetic values. Because our public investment strategies must yield multiple benefits, capturing the value of ecosystem services will improve project design and our return on investment. Uncertainties about climate change, economic and population growth, technology, environmental conditions, and social preferences create headaches for politicians and planners the world over. And uncertainty can be paralyzing. The further away the horizon, the less clear we see. But if we don't have some path forward, we'll get nowhere, or maybe end up in a worse place. Fortunately, better science, robust data, and new policy tools can help us adapt to an uncertain future. The Delta Commission sketched a horizon for us, quote, an attractive place in which to live and work, to invest and take leisure, unquote. One Commission recommendation for that attractive place is the creation of additional water storage capacity in Lake IJssel to ensure that fresh water supply. This may sound odd for a country with too much water, but climate variability will confront us with both wetter and drier weather. So how do we presently use fresh water? We use it for agriculture and irrigation, to counter saltwater intrusion in our rivers and saltwater seepage in groundwater, to flush water systems and counteract nutrients and pollutants caused by human activity, for drinking and industrial process water, to operate our intricate system of gates, sluices, pumps, ditches and surface water levels, to keep our levees wet and stable during times of drought. If we create more freshwater storage by raising water levels in Lake IJssel, we can also drain the lake by gravity, important flood control consideration, even when the sea level rises. Problem solved? No, because we'll also have to raise the dikes surrounding the lake to counter the increased flood risk. We could tackle the freshwater problem through other means: water efficiency, by planting more salt-tolerant crops, or migrating farms to areas with a reliable water supply. These options are not cost-free either, as they displace farmers and require more sluices, pumps and inlets to move and manage water during droughts. If climate change impacts are uncertain, should we wait until the freshwater dangers appear? That could be dangerous. Should we implement aggressively? That could be wasteful. Do we just muddle through? That could be both wasteful and dangerous. New policy and planning tools available can help. And one of these is called DAP, D-A-P-P, or Dynamic Adaptive Policy Pathways. DAPP helps in three ways. First, it articulates a strategic vision. Second, it implements short-term, no-regret actions. And third, it deploys a monitoring and decision-making framework to guide future decisions. DAPP takes nothing for granted in the long term, but moves things forward in the short term. DAPP embraces the use of tipping points, which is when a strategy can no longer meet its objectives, becomes insufficient and fails. Reaching a tipping point means that the forces of failure are self-sustaining. They are not one-off or cyclical events. Tipping points show us how much climate change, how much sea level rise, how much weather intensity the current management regime can absorb. They tell us when a new policy or direction is needed. This is important because knowing which investment are needed, at what place and when, is crucial. So let me now move away from policy into the realm of practice, where landscape architecture, spatial planning, and multiple layers of defense come together, where cost-benefit analysis meets sustainability, where we respect and use nature's unique ways of creating and destroying, where today's safety does not impede tomorrow's resiliency. What follows is a clear and direct embrace of design. Design is the interlocutor between grey and green infrastructure, between single-purpose projects and multifunctional ones. Design reduces cost and creates more value for money. Designers creatively tackle complex physical challenges and give us functional, innovative, attractive, and affordable solutions. I'll begin in Amsterdam. Lively, cultural, walkable, waterlogged. Its famous canals, 400 years old this year, are the spine of the city. Amsterdam is lovely, dynamic, but has a shortage of homes. Just east of the city, a new sustainable community is rising from the bottom of Lake A. Land uses are mixed, and dwellings, while dense, are spread across 6 man-made islands which are elevated above projected flood levels. Public transport is nearby. Eiburg combines flood-resilient urban architecture, including floating homes, with parkland and water storage areas to provide recreation, risk reduction, and resiliency. Eiburg also values aesthetic values, where street fronts borrow heavily from historic Amsterdam, making this new development a natural extension of our most famous city, Rotterdam. A second example, however, is right here in Rotterdam, which I think is soon becoming a very famous city, which sees climate change as a threat and an opportunity. The threat? Water levels increasing from 4 directions: stormwater from above, groundwater from below, rising sea levels from the west, and more river discharge from the east. Because raising the dikes is not an option, a new school of water-based planning and design has exploded. The opportunity? As the old inner port is abandoned for newer, larger facilities closer to the sea, urban renewal opportunities abound. Parking garages, skate parks, and urban plazas are storing water. Buried canals are being reopened. Water taxis are connecting neighborhoods. Green roofs and stormwater collection systems are commonplace, and retrofits of buildings, streets, and neighborhoods are serving multiple climate adaptation goals. Founded in the 8th century, Utrecht, a city in the center of the Netherlands, is encircled by lakes, rivers, and farmland, and straddles our inland navigation and rail networks. Medicine and health are its engine, and Utrecht is also known as the center of religion in the Netherlands. To grow safely, Utrecht first studied its flood risk and vulnerabilities. Water depth, flood arrival times, and flood impacts were assessed on Utrecht's infrastructure, road, rail, IT, energy, and water supply. Flood impacts on nearby nuclear and chemical industries, residential and industrial areas, and vulnerable groups of society were reviewed. Utrecht's plan combines ways to keep water out, prevention, with ways to minimize damage, adaptation, with ways to speed recovery, resiliency. In short, just what the Delta Commission called for. The plan sets forth a menu for buildings, infrastructure, key networks, and public spaces. Stormwater storage compartments in basements. Elevation of critical infrastructure at the residential, industrial, and commercial scales. Waterproof or floodable first floors and building materials. Amphibious buildings and water storage in public spaces. Multifunctional dikes and buildings and movable dams and flood walls. Utrecht's plan is not groundbreaking. Officials acknowledge that they were inspired by the efforts in other Dutch cities and from abroad. But what makes Utrecht's plan unique and instructive for wet cities are 2 things. It keeps flood risk prevention, adaptation and resiliency at the forefront of every plan. It gives planners and developers a diverse toolkit to ensure Utrecht's survival for a few more centuries. Next up is our Room for the River program, which was developed in response to near floods along Dutch rivers in the 1990s. Room for the River has 35 projects and focuses upon two explicit goals: improving floodplain functions and increasing the area's spatial quality. One project is in Nijmegen, a city of about 200,000 people along the Rhine River. The river channel near Nijmegen narrows drastically, from 1 mile wide to less than a third of a mile wide. When the snow melts in the Alps, or it rains heavily in Germany, water stacks up just above the city, threatening life and property. A river bypass north of the city was the obvious solution, but that would mean takings, land acquisition, increased infrastructure cost, and it would not improve the area's spatial quality. So a second option was created with city stakeholders. This option sets back the river dike, creates a new water channel and a wider floodplain. Environmentalists get new parkland. Water managers get lower flood risks. Shippers get more reliable navigation. Citizens get new, high-value waterfront opportunities, residential, retail and commercial. This project showcases the real benefits of how design creates more value, more safety and lower long-term costs. Just east of Rotterdam, we have the Noordwaard project. Here, we are notching levees to create a diversion channel that will purposely flood farmland. The Noordwaard project, at 11,000 square acres, will reduce flood risk in nearby cities of Gorinchem and Dordrecht, returns previously diked wetlands to their natural state, and improve ecosystem connectivity in a nearby national park. It broadens a migratory bird flyway and restores a resilient landscape that disappeared almost 200 years ago. Nearby, an old historic fort and village will be protected by an old-new approach to wave energy reduction. Instead of building a high dike to surround the fort, a low dike will be constructed and then fronted with a 1.5 mile long by 100 meter wide set of willow trees. These trees provide habitat and environmental quality, reduce storm level water heights by 80%, and substantially lower dike construction and maintenance cost. Mankind's preference for taming a dynamic coast has been hard engineered structures, jetties, seawalls, sea dikes. While these structures are often essential if mankind is to live safely near water, they are inflexible and often aggravate the problem they were supposed to solve. Hybrid engineering is the foundation of our 5-year-old Building with Nature program. By combining natural dynamic processes with engineering, we develop flexible, scalable solutions that are more resilient than hard structures. The willow trees at Noordwaard are a good example. Elsewhere, we are seeding oyster reefs in front of many of our delta dikes, which reduce destructive wave energy, lower wave heights, trap sediments, create land, and remove pollution and nutrients from the water column. Talk about multiple benefits. Similarly, we are restoring mudflats and water-based forests. These forests boast an intricate web of underwater roots that build soil and provide habitat. Wood, food, fiber, filtration, and carbon storage. Building with Nature shows that hybrid engineering can solve delta challenges and improve ecosystems. It is adaptive at all scales, from the tiniest microestuary to deltas and coastlines around the globe. I will wrap up this part of the lecture by discussing the sand engine. Every year, we must stabilize our coastline by adding 12 million cubic meters of sand to our foreshore. Sea level rise scenarios suggest a doubling or tripling of those sand additions. We're lucky to have large volumes of sand nearby and innovative, cost-effective Dutch dredgers. In 2011, 21 million cubic meters of sand, double our annual amount and occupying about 1 square mile, was placed in a big pile along the Dutch coast in 2011. Nature's engine, wind, water and waves, will distribute the sand, with some finding its ways into the dunes, increasing their strength and attractiveness, with some fortifying the foreshore, providing immediate flood protection benefit, and with the rest migrating to northern stretches of our coast. The $70 million project will teach us more about sediment transport and possibly make nearby sand supplementation unnecessary for the next 20 years. The sand engine may also save millions of euros in annual dredging cost. A surprising sand engine spin-off is the tourism it generated. Windsurfing and wave running are big sports in the Netherlands, and the sand engine has made our coastline a go-to destination for wind and wave running enthusiasts. 2 decades ago, Harvard economist Michael Porter wrote The Competitive Advantage of Nations. In it, he shows how a nation's landscape, culture, labor supply, industries, and governing institutions give it a distinct economic identity and advantage. Italy's unparalleled craft industries, Japan's integration of supply chains, the US's innovation capacity, Germany's manufacturing excellence, all these come to mind. In the Netherlands, water is part of our economic identity. Shipbuilding, logistics, harbor management, sustainable waterfronts, construction in wet soils, dredging, delta management, water technology, all these grew from our wet soil. Water is soon becoming the world's most precious natural resource. It keeps us alive, grows our food, and is crucial to industrial manufacturing and energy processes. As countries develop, they consume more water. The challenge of water is, as many have framed it, too much, too little, too polluted, and often in the wrong place. 4 key issues drive our international development cooperation policy: the rule of law, food security, sexual and reproductive rights and health, and water. Michael Porter was right. Our competitive advantage in water is deployed in multilateral fora like the UN, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and in bilateral relations with Asian, African, and South American nations. I want to showcase a few of these projects because they reflect how the Dutch government, primarily the Ministries of Foreign Affairs and Infrastructure and Environment, and our embassies abroad, actively exploit our water expertise in the pursuit of our international policies. So let me start with the Water Partnership Program. At this moment, almost 1 billion people lack a safe, reliable water supply. 1/3 of the world's population lack proper sanitation. Urban water systems must increase supply for more than 1 billion people over the next 15 years just to stand still. Climate change will worsen this water stress. Together with Denmark and the United Kingdom, we have established an $11.5 billion World Bank Trust Fund to support climate-resilient water supply, infrastructure and sanitation projects benefiting 50 million people in 26 countries, and 17 million of these are in Africa. Indonesia has every water challenge imaginable: highly variable water levels, poor drainage, extreme subsidence between 2 to 10 inches a year, excessive groundwater extraction, insufficient fresh water, coastal erosion, and deteriorating flood protection structures. It also has a rapidly developing industrial economy, a pressing need for housing, and poor water quality. Solving each of these problems in isolation is possible, but such an approach would exacerbate the other problems. Our national and provincial governments and our water boards have strong partnerships with Indonesian authorities. Our embassy in Jakarta is a beehive, or should I say a spawning ground, of water and climate-related activity. Many projects, large and small, are underway. I won't describe them, we'd be here all night if I did, but the projects have two key priorities. First, developing the technical capacity needed to design and operate a sophisticated integrated water resources management plan, taking into account sea level rise. Second, creating and empowering the governance structures necessary to oversee, implement, and fund such plans. A few other examples in Colombia, Vietnam, and Bangladesh. Let's start with Colombia. Colombia's 1,700-meter coastline is diverse and idyllic. Rocky cliffs, mangrove forests, muddy bays, sandy beaches, abundant estuaries and deltas. It is also slowly eroding away. Man-made structures and processes, jetties, dams, hydropower facilities, sand mining, mangrove and mudflat destruction are accelerating the erosion. Unlike Indonesia's complex set of problems, Colombia's problems can be solved by restoring the coastal sediment balance. Fortunately, elements of our Building with Nature program are tailor-made for this task, and that's what we do in Colombia. The Vietnamese government recognized the enormous importance of water to the regional development of the Mekong Delta, an area crucial for the national and regional food supply. Think rice. Dutch experts are helping to draft a Mekong Delta plan, and Ho Chi Minh City has used Dutch planners and designers to create its own climate adaptation plan. On to Bangladesh. The world's largest delta is in Bangladesh, where water management has a direct impact on whether people live or die. Densely populated, Bangladesh faces regular flooding at an unimaginable scale. We have provided Bangladesh with water management aid since its independence, and cooperation is increasing because of sea level rise. Here too, we are helping them develop a national delta plan that has a 50 to 100-year horizon. And now, to come a little bit closer to home, in this case the United States, which still feels a little bit like home to me. Let me wrap up by highlighting collaboration in the US that benefits both countries, which is exactly what Dutch taxpayers expect us, civil servants, to do on their behalf. First of all, Louisiana, and Paul, you mentioned it already. Hurricane Katrina, for all of its devastation, created a Louisiana-based nexus of hyper-creativity in flood protection, wetland restoration and adaptations. Since 2005, we have deepened relationship with US scientists working on delta and climate change issues. Dutch provinces are learning emergency management techniques from Louisiana officials. Dutch engineers share their knowledge of levee construction, inspection, maintenance, and integrated flood protection with their Cajun counterparts. Around New Orleans, Dutch engineers helped design one of the world's largest flood control structures. We are jointly analyzing sea level rise impacts on low-lying towns and barrier islands and sharing research on sediments, water safety, and hydrology. Deltares, based nearby in Delft, is motivated by its mission statement, called Enabling Delta Life. Louisiana authorities asked us to engage Deltares because they wanted to replicate it in Louisiana, especially after Katrina and the BP oil spill. We helped Deltares collaborate with the Louisiana government and its universities to create a vision, mandate and operating structure for the Water Institute of the Gulf, or TWIG. TWIG. TWIG is up and running today. Its staff and board will visit the Netherlands for the umpteenth time next week. Exchanges between their scientists and ours are intense, and more robust collaborations are planned. Perhaps our most ambitious project is in New Orleans, where a Dutch-American team, under the guidance of New Orleans architect David Wagoner, David is in yeah, there he is, has developed the city's first integrated water management strategy, or WMS. That WMS is a result of the Dutch Dialogues, a series of cross-cultural, cross-discipline workshops initiated by our embassy in Washington with David and Paul Farmer. The WMS is generating a new, sustainable path forward for New Orleans. Other cities, including post-Sandy New York, are clamoring for their own Dutch dialogues. And David and his Dutch team hope to soon secure funding for and break ground on the WMS pilots. Nothing less than New Orleans' future is at stake. In 2011, Mississippi River floods were devastating and showed a massive river system filled to the brim. Why? Weather and mankind, seasonal rainfall, rapid snow melt, and a constricted floodplain that could not function as Mother Nature had intended. These conditions, flooded river cities, farmland underwater, loss of life, disinvestment, may become commonplace if climate change scenarios hold true. And just 12 months later, a lengthy drought, water levels at their lowest in 80 years, river navigation stalled 1,000 miles away in New Orleans, a sill being built in the river to stop salt water from intruding upriver into drinking water intakes. The Dutch Delta Commissioner projected too much rain, too much water in the river, and periods of drought, low water, and salt intrusion for the Netherlands in 50 years. Except this future is happening right in the breadbasket of America today. Dutch experts from the Delta Commission, the Room for the River program, Deltares, and the private sector were eager to help when Mississippi River stakeholders called. Just 2 months ago, the Embassy and Washington University led a 4-day workshop in St. Louis. Louis. I know one of the two is right and wrong. Louis. Scenarios were imagined, landscape and hydraulic conditions were investigated, and a research agenda was developed. Another workshop will dig deeper into the challenges. The partners intend to produce river management, planning and landscape strategies that can be implemented in communities up and down the Mississippi. And the Dutch can take some lessons home to the Netherlands. Some of the same Dutch river experts gathered in Los Angeles less than 2 weeks ago. Most of us know the Los Angeles River, not because of its green, lush river banks, but instead from Hollywood movies. You know, the grey concrete culvert that is the background for car chases in many Hollywood action films. Now remember, Dale, we went to see it about a year ago, and it's absolutely shocking if you expect to see a river and you see this concrete thing. The LA River was once free-flowing, accessible, and full of wildlife and wetlands. When the river was confined to a concrete channel, Los Angeles gained flood safety, but lost its green heart. Since the 1980s, citizens have been trying to restore and reopen the river. They know the river can be more than a drain and provide more amenity than just a backdrop for Hollywood blockbusters. Reopening the river won't be easy, but doing so will solve many of that city's climate change problems. Los Angeles stakeholders see our Room for the River program as a model, and we are trying to help. In 2009, during the 400th anniversary of Henry Hudson's voyage to America, water issues in New York City were analyzed by Dutch and US experts. One scenario was uniquely alarming: a lunar tide coinciding with a high-power coastal storm coming ashore in the New York region. And that scenario became real last October, Hurricane Sandy. Our consulate in New York, our embassy in Washington, and the professionals from the 2009 conference were activated. The initial reaction to the storm build barriers, seawalls, close off the bay, was one we understood. We were honored by the growing chorus to call in the Dutch to build us barriers. Barriers are but one part of our repertoire, and we responded with a more varied tune. We recommended that before any decisions were made, the entire region should assess its near-term vulnerabilities to storm surge. That landscape, occupation, hydrology and hydraulic conditions be reviewed with sea level rise in mind. That a regional plan be devised to focus decision makers. And that a toolkit of options, large and small, technical and non-technical, grey and green, be developed to mitigate the near and mid-term coastal events. We Dutch don't pretend to have all the answers. We can't navigate US politics or choose specific investments or implement plans, but we can help American experts access, investigate, cost-benefit, imagine, design, and plan. We have 800 years of experience, or as some say, 800 years of mistakes. So we know a little bit what we're talking about. So we Dutch have returned to New York, not to buy it back and make up for the bad deal we made just over 400 years ago, although we are tempted, not to tell the New Yorkers what to do, but instead to collaborate, to learn, to help. So let me wrap up. I began with a story about water and risk and moved to economics, science and design. I talked about shared challenges, shared goals and a shared future. Last winter, Sean Donovan, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development and Chairman of the Hurricane Sandy Task Force, came to the Netherlands to learn from our past and our future. He departed with good ideas, our promise to help, and Henk Ovink. There's Henk. Henk used to be our Interim Director General for Water and Planning. He now works for Secretary Donovan on planning and water. Henk will transfer Dutch approaches to the New York, New Jersey region, and he will learn how the best US expertise is put to work to prepare the region for the next Sandy. This exchange exemplifies Dutch-American water collaboration and is a testament to our shared future. And perhaps, just maybe, we are secretly hoping that New Yorkers embrace their Dutch roots and the Dutch water and planning practices that will keep their feet dry too. Together, we can solve joint water issues. Together, climate change is manageable. Together, we can innovate, design, protect, and plan a better future in East Africa, in Asia, in Europe, and even in New York. And together, we can reignite a legacy that has its root in that little city on the bank of the Hudson that was once called New Amsterdam. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Such an inspiring talk, one that again shows that we're listening to someone with great vision, great pragmatism. You mentioned interrelationships and noted a few unintended effects. I still think that you think like a planner. So we are particularly happy to be able to hear you again address these kinds of issues. I mentioned that Jen Graef is our international program manager. Jen works primarily on our Latin American project. And just as you are now in charge of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we are working with the U.S. State Department, the equivalent, because under Barack Obama as our president and then Secretary Hillary Clinton, a decision was made that urbanization and human settlement patterns and urban growth, much of it in deltas around the world, really mattered when it came to foreign policy issues. And so we've been working on capacity building in all of Latin America and recently helped create a 19-nation planning association of the island nations in the Caribbean. And we're now working on sustainable urban housing in Bolivia, Peru, Brazil, and Mexico. So we also look forward to perhaps partnerships on some of the water issues in those countries with our Dutch colleagues. We are, I believe, going to take a few questions and answers. We would ask that you speak into the microphone because this is being recorded, and also ask that you keep the question brief and end the question with a question mark.
And I will say that I will take the easy ones, and the difficult ones I'll pass on to Dale and to Paul and to everybody else here in the audience who knows much more about it than I do. An easy question.
There must be some, so don't be shy at all. To get it going, I'm afraid I'm going to have David Wagoner or Dale Morris actually ask a question, but there must be some here about some of the things we've heard. Yes, please, in the back row.
Looking back last 3 years, what mistakes have you made where we can learn from?
In the Netherlands?
Well, no, in the collaboration.
I certainly think one mistake that we Dutch sometimes tend to think we know it all. I think we're pretty smart and we're pretty innovative, certainly in terms of water issues, as I think the example showed. But in other things we can really learn. For example, evacuation of large groups of people. I mean, I think the United States is in a way much better prepared for that. And have we thought that through enough? So I think through collaboration, you come with your own presumptions and your own ideas and your own knowledge, and that's often useful or inspiring to others, but you immediately also learn from others. There are things that we didn't think about or that we can learn. I mean, the massive scale of problems in Bangladesh, huge width of the rivers. I mean, you learn something, I think, by every different environment where you work, but it always goes both ways. Dale, can you think of a mistake that we've made?
As an American who's been working for the Dutch, the largest mistake I would say that the Dutch make is they underestimate how difficult water challenges are in the rest of the world where the entire country is not threatened by water. So the Dutch, I tell American audiences that the Dutch problem is much easier to solve because the entire country is at risk, and thus these tremendous efforts that the Dutch make are easier than in the U.S. And so the enthusiasm that Dutch experts show when they come to the U.S. to solve the problems can come over as arrogant sometimes when the American planners just say, yeah, we agree, but we don't have a political system that can accommodate that. And thus tempering the Dutch enthusiasm and applying it in a long-term way is a challenge for us.
Yep. So. Budgeting, I think, is interesting. Within the Delta plan have budgeted for, I think, 50 years ahead. That's, from what I understand, but our American colleagues know that better, unthinkable in the United States that you budget so long ahead, right? It's every year an annual challenge.
Another question, please. Yes.
Mag niet vasthouden. Bas Jonkman, Delft University. Thank you for your speech. I have a question about the opportunities for the Dutch water sector, because we see that the playing field is changing, especially if we look at the deltas in Asia and Africa. The problems are very large, but we also see that the Dutch government is cutting the budgets for international cooperation, and a lot of water projects have been supported or kickstarted by Dutch funding. If we look at Vietnam, the average yearly income is €1,000 per year. A Dutch engineer costs €1,000 per day. In your view, or the view of the ministry, what are, let's say, the mechanisms of the future for the Dutch water sector to be also commercially active in the future?
Well, I think we've got an interesting new development in this cabinet. It's for the first time that we've combined the portfolios of the Minister for Development and the Minister for Foreign Trade, Minister Ploemen, who has Foreign Trade and Development. And I think it's something that you see happening in a lot of countries. I mean, there's obviously some countries that are very poor and in conflict situation that will still really remain countries where we have mainly a development relationship. But you see that many countries are growing out of dire poverty and are much more interested in trade and investment type of relationship than purely a development, a charity type of relationship. So even though we are cutting our budget, and unfortunately because of the economic crisis, that's a reality happening in a lot of countries at the moment, we still are focusing on water. I said in our development policy we have 4 priority areas, and water is one of them. So there still is some money available there. We're setting up a new fund, the Dutch Good Growth Fund, with new money to help small businesses to do business in developing countries that are transitioning out of poverty. We have the top sector policy. We've identified 8 or 9 top sectors in the Dutch economy where we make an extra effort. So our embassies and water, of course, is one of our top sectors, and our embassies are very active to develop the networks, the access. So I think even though we have to cut our budget, both for the development work and for our embassy network, we will try to keep on focusing on markets with potential, growth markets, emerging economies or the emerged economies, and water is still an area of priority both in our economic policy and our development policy. So I think we have to be more creative, right? Somebody said to me the other day, I don't have so much money anymore, so I have to start thinking. And I thought that was a very interesting remark. To a certain extent, we come out of a very period of growth, and now we're in a different period. And you can be very depressed about it and say, oh dear, it's a crisis. Or you can say, well, this triggers us to think much better about innovative solutions and creative ideas. And I was talking to Dirk-Jan van den Berg from Delft University, the chief of your board, who was very optimistic and enthusiastic about everything that's happening in Delft. And I think we have to create not only room for the river, but room for that type of innovation as well.
There's one in front here.
Madam Minister, thank you for your comments today. From the United States, I was taken by Dale's comment as far as how difficult things are to achieve and the time frame that it takes in our country. Whereas in Holland, it seems to me that the young people of your country are the importance of water management and the role that water plays in your future is ingrained in the young people today, much more than we see it in the United States. Are there any lessons that you have learned in the education of young people that we might learn from in the United States that would help to bridge that gap that Dale referred to?
I think Dale was right in saying that for the Netherlands it's existential, right? If 2/3 of your country is at or below sea level, you basically have no choice. And you really have to constantly think about the risk of water, or we wouldn't be here in the first place. And some people say that explains the Dutch character, and some other people say it explains why we're so tall, because we have to keep our head above the water. So I don't know which one of the two is true. I think the big difference in the United States is you have so much space. I saw it again with a hurricane in Moore, was it last week, 2 weeks ago? Joplin last year, a whole area gets destroyed and people just, pick up or leave what there is and they start half a mile further on and they build cheap housing again. And there was a Dutch journalist there saying, well, why are you building wooden houses again or why don't you build concrete house? Because then next time there's a hurricane, there's less risk. Well, do you want to spend the money or do you have the money to spend on it? And that's why the Dutch phrase, cost comes before benefit. You have to invest, and it might be a little bit more expensive now, but it saves you in the long run. But who is the congressman now who has to decide on the budget, and is he interested or she in the budget 20 or 30 years from now? And that's always a very difficult political you have to weigh the two. And you have the luxury of lots and lots of space in the United States. And on the other hand, a lot of your business and agriculture is around river areas and big cities like New York, New Jersey. You see the effect of an enormous storm like Sandy also on your infrastructure and on ports and houses. So, yeah, one way or the other. And that is why international cooperation helps. Because you see how people do it in different countries, right? So send a lot of young Americans to the Netherlands, and they can all come and study in Delft, right? And we have some other good universities as well. But I think through exchange or through seeing how things are done in other, it gives you ideas for your own countries. Just like, you know, us going to the United States, we get ideas of how to do things. So I really believe in the importance of international exchange, particularly of young people. And to go and study or come to school here.
Is there another question? Yes, there is. The upper left.
In thinking about deltas, discussion often starts by funding. And especially in the United States, it almost always starts from funding. But my question to you is, what is first? Is it funding or inspiration?
I should ask our American colleagues to answer this. So I'll refer to both of you in any case to say something, and Dale maybe can say something too. I think inspiration is really important, but as you all know, often things come down to money and budgets and how much you can or want to make available, you know, for what. And you see it in my country now. We've been doing pretty well until a couple of years ago. And now we are trying to say, should we stay below the 3% budget deficit, or does it matter, does it not matter? Fierce economic and political debates. So I think funding is very important because you have to have a long-term vision. The vision comes first, but the money has to follow. And I can see that that's more difficult in a big country like the United States. But Paul, maybe you want to say something.
I would agree entirely. I said earlier that I had found that you were both visionary and pragmatic, and I think that that's what you need in leadership. You do have to have a vision, or else you just keep doing the same old thing. But at the same time, you've got to figure out what the steps are to get there. In New Orleans, the study that David Wagner is heading calls for major paradigm shifts. Paradigm shifts that the Dutch have made, because the Dutch didn't always do it the way we see it done over here now. But in New Orleans, I do believe that simply doing it the same old way, building the dikes a little bit higher, those kind of things will not lead to risk reduction of any extent. In Moore, when the tornadoes hit, we certainly have seen that many of the schools, many of the houses did not have safe rooms or safe houses, which is one of the more economical ways of providing safety. And so one does need the vision to kind of show a better future. At the same time, you do have to be able to convince people. You've got to be able to get the money. That's the pragmatic side. So I see them as sort of hand in glove. I don't think one follows the other.
And that's why the economic model is quite interesting, where you cost the different aspects.
So, as an American who studied American political practice, as an American who studied American political practice, both in the economic and political realm, Americans by nature are reactive. We do not look too far forward. Our political system is meant to respond, not to prepare. Congress is designed to be slow and ineffective, and only after everything else fails. This is absolutely true. It is framed by the Constitution to be that way. And only when there's a national crisis, which means something bad has already happened, will the U.S. respond. So I think that's what the Dutch need to understand about the United States system, is that the political system is not designed to be efficient or effective by nature. However, when you talk about inspiration, I'm looking around the room, and I see Robert de Koning, and of course the most inspirational landscape architect that I know, or at least the most senior inspirational landscape, Steven Slabbers. they have come to New Orleans and they have inspired, into St. Louis and to Los Angeles, and they have inspired a number of Americans to take up this field of using design to create attractive, safe places. And so I think it's your job to continue to come to the United States to help us figure this out and make Renée's job more easy to promote collaboration and to promote the growth of the Dutch economy. I mean, I have no doubt about that, that's what you all want to do, and do it well, and you can. So we take inspiration from you, and there's no doubt that any of us who've seen Stephen in that picture of St. Louis doing this, you know what he's doing. He's inspiring folks. So thank you.
I was lucky enough in my freshman year in college in 1962 to be in Rice Stadium when we had a freshman week speaker, a young president, John Kennedy, who gave his so-called moon speech, where he said that by the end of the decade we would have a man on the moon. And so I think that we have had bursts of leadership, and that perhaps the area of risk reduction is an area where we may see some leadership at some point, because we face the multiple risks. We face the hurricanes in the south and on the east coast. We face the tornadoes in the midsection of the country. We face other kinds of hazardous conditions in a very, very large country. So what I think we need is national leadership at some point that looks holistically at all of those risks and comes up with a plan for the nation to not just address one risk, but to look at the risks that we face as a nation and address them all together. Another comment or question? Yes. Oh, microphone down, please.
Well, imagine myself as a devil's advocate here. Suppose I was one of the poor inhabitants of Oklahoma whose house was just blown down. Average house there must be $100,000. What would it cost to build a house in concrete that would sustain a medium-sized tornado?
In terms of a house, I really don't know. We had an article in Planning Magazine just a few months ago on the concept of safe rooms for houses. What is, I think, more practical and is affordable is a safe room in a house. So you may lose your house indeed, but you don't lose your lives, and there were a number of lives lost. And so I think that's the more likely way to go, as opposed to construction that would where every house might withstand a tornado. There are tornadoes hit with 290-mile-an-hour winds, for example. Yeah. Another question? I don't see any right now, so I would really like to thank our speaker once again. And I know that something about the speaker right. Renée Jones-Bos and her husband had traveled the U.S. extensively during their years in Washington, D.C. And I know that they traveled to more state capitals than anybody I've ever met in the U.S. And so they didn't visit a non-state capital where I live, which is Chicago, Illinois. Our state capital is downstate. So I thought that, Renée, you could continue your education in planning by looking at the plans of Chicago, many of which are quite visionary. Okay. And also, Martin, they're right down. Again, thanks so much for the partnership here this evening, and would like to present you another Chicago book, Chicago Architecture and Design. So perhaps if you haven't been to Chicago, you can get your appetite whet for a visit. If not, come visit again. So thank you again. Thank you all.
Thank you.